Imagine waking up on a planet where heat simply no longer exists, where the sun barely warms your skin and cold dominates every inch of your reality. Sounds like science fiction, but what if this became the new normal for all of us? The end of heat. What if the whole world was like this village? Is not just an intriguing title. It's an invitation to imagine what would happen if the entire planet turned into a giant freezer, just like the coldest village on Earth, Oymyakon. In this scenario, everything changes. The way we live, work, and connect with each other. Life becomes a daily battle against the cold, where even breathing can be painful. But what if I told you that within this extreme adversity, there's also a chance for a fresh start? An opportunity to rethink our relationship with nature, our values, and even ourselves. Get ready to discover historical facts, curiosities, and mysteries that will blow your mind, and maybe even change the way you think. Can you imagine waking up and, before even opening your eyes, feeling the air slicing your skin like tiny invisible blades? No warmth, no gentle breeze. Just the muffled sound of your own breathing, as if the world itself had frozen time. Sounds like a scene from a post-apocalyptic movie, right? But that's the daily reality of a curious little place called Oymyakon in Siberia. And that interesting fact is what we'll use to stretch the imagination. What if the entire world were like that? Heat as we know it would cease to exist. The 4 seasons would become just one. Winter, uninterrupted and unforgiving. The whole planet, from Tokyo to Sao Paulo, would become a global Oymyakon 2.0, where the greatest luxury would literally be a bit of body heat. In this new world, nothing would work the way we know. Pipes would burst, cars would turn into blocks of ice, and just opening your front door would make breathing a challenge. Water. It would freeze before hitting the ground. Seriously. Leaving the house would require multiple layers of clothing, as if heading into an Arctic expedition. That would become the new normal. Now think, how would schools operate? And hospitals? What about the global economy if transportation froze solid? Every corner of the planet would switch to survival mode. It's curious to think that something as simple as going out to buy bread would become a mission. Even the technology we use every day, phones, computers, the internet, could fail in an instant, literally freezing up. Life as we know it would shift from water to ice. What most people don't realize is just how much we depend on heat to exist. Warmth is in the smallest things. A touch, a hot meal, the energy that keeps the world running. Take that away, and all that's left is instinct. In a planet turned icebox, humanity would need to rediscover the essentials. This thought experiment reveals curiosities about our own fragility and dependence on the climate. It's almost a mystery to think that, even with so much technology, we'd be as vulnerable to the cold as prehistoric humans. But what if there were a way to adapt? What if, like in Oymyakon, humanity could find a way to survive, even in this extreme environment? The clues might be hidden in much older and more surprising practices than most people would ever guess. Now that you've imagined an entire planet frozen solid, it's time to ask yourself, what would it be like to live in it every single day? The answer is simple. Everything would be about survival. Things that seem ordinary today, like taking a hot shower or going for a walk, would turn into complex missions. Homes would need to be constantly heated with real fire. Wood, coal, whatever's available. Forget electric heaters or warm air conditioning. In a world where the cold beats even technology, not even the electrical system can handle it. And the cars, they simply couldn't be turned off. Literally. If you turn off the engine, it freezes, and that's it. It may sound curious, but it's true. In Oymyakon, many residents leave their cars running for days just to make sure they still work. The streets in this new world would be almost empty. The truth is, no one would want to go outside unless it was absolutely necessary. going out to buy bread around the corner, only if you're up for a battle. In places like the Siberian village that inspired this idea, even fetching water can take hours. And it's not because the water's far, but because the whole process becomes a challenge. Walking in extreme cold requires layers and layers of clothes, heavy boots, gloves that feel like armor, and hats that cover even your eyes. Still, body parts like your nose and cheeks can freeze in just a few minutes. That's why people only leave the house when they really have to. It may sound extreme, but here's an interesting fact. When everything becomes harder, we start valuing the basics a whole lot more. And don't think you could just wing it in a place like this. Everything would need to be planned in advance. From the moment you wake up to how you cook your food, everything changes. Cooking, for example, would only work if fire was always available, because gas might fail, and your food could freeze before it's even done. To stay warm at night, many families would rely on wood-burning stoves inside the house. Fire would become the new gold. The world's energy would be powered more by instinct than by technology. In a reality where ice dominates everything, even the way people take care of each other would change. Neighbors who barely talked would start helping one another, sharing warmth, food, and safety. Constant cold creates an invisible bond, and a silent warning. Life in this frozen world would be a daily battle, but also a powerful lesson in adaptation. And this opens up another curiosity. What would people even eat in a place where the soil doesn't let you grow a single thing? If food is one of the biggest sources of comfort for most people, in a frozen world it would stop being about pleasure and become pure instinct. That colorful image of a table full of fresh fruits, green vegetables, and sweet desserts would vanish. With the ground frozen all year long, farming would be impossible. Not even a potato would sprout. And here's an interesting fact. In this icy new planet, diets would rely entirely on meat and fat. Meat from animals adapted to the cold, like reindeer, woolly cows, horses, and of course, fish from frozen rivers. That's right. Ice fishing would become one of the few ways to get fresh protein. And believe it or not, people would spend hours out in the cutting wind just to catch a few fish. Food would no longer be about flavor, it would be a survival strategy. Fat, which today many try to avoid, would become essential. It would keep the body warm and provide the energy needed to face the brutal temperatures. A great curiosity is a dish called stroganina, popular in regions like Oymyakon. Raw fish, completely frozen, sliced thinly and eaten just like that, like an icy sashimi. No stove, no seasoning. Just a knife and courage. Dishes like that would become the new rice and beans of this cold world. Fatty stews, smoked meats, and even mare's milk would be part of the menu. And the wildest part, no one would get sick from this. Quite the opposite. This type of diet would be what kept people strong enough to function in the ice. With no need for refrigerators, since the whole world would already be one. Food would be stored outdoors or in underground cellars. No plastic, no microwaves, no delivery apps. Everything would be rugged, old school. Rice, tea, canned goods. Only if brought from far away. And expensive. Eating would become an act of resistance. Almost a ritual. Taste would be the last priority. The goal would be staying warm on the inside. And that's more real than it sounds. It's still a mystery to many how Arctic people survive on diets made almost entirely of meat and fat. But the truth is, when nature is understood and respected, it teaches more than any nutrition guide. In a world where even your food could freeze before it's cooked, how you eat reveals not just your culture, but your strength. And speaking of culture, have you ever wondered what traditions and behaviors would look like in a world like that? In a planet where heat simply no longer exists, human culture would have to change too. And fast. Values, rituals, even the way people relate to each other would be completely different. Vanity, appearances, urgency, and status would lose their meaning. In their place, resilience, simplicity, and a sense of community would rise. The art of surviving in extreme cold leaves no room for fluff. The curious thing is that in frozen environments like Oymyakon, isolation actually creates connection. People stick together because they know they won't make it alone. Sharing firewood, food, or just a little body heat becomes more than kindness. It becomes instinct. With this cultural shift, new habits, traditions, and even beliefs would be born. The way we celebrate life would be completely transformed. People in icy villages, for example, sing traditional folk songs, not for fame or applause, but to keep the soul warm. These are simple, yet powerful rituals. And here's an interesting fact. The harder life is, the richer the culture can become. In this new world, hospitality would become sacred. Welcoming a visitor, sharing a bowl of hot soup, or telling a story around the fire, that would be pure gold. Even with everything frozen on the outside, humans would find a way to keep the inside alive. These new codes of behavior would turn the cold into a kind of school for humanity. Technology would no longer be at the center. Ancestral wisdom would take the lead. A good example. In Oymyakon, many families learn from an early age how to predict the weather by watching the sky or listening to the sound of the ice under their feet. Curiosities that turn into pure survival. It's curious how, in places where almost nothing grows, the best examples of adaptation seem to thrive. And here's the question. In a world like that, would there still be room for competition, stress, and ego? Or would we live in a way that's more connected to what truly matters? Maybe. But before we answer that, there's one more thing to explore. In this frozen world, who or what would actually survive? When we think of a frozen world, the first image that comes to mind is a lifeless scene, white and silent. But in reality, nature has a curious and impressive way of adapting and surviving even in the harshest conditions. On a planet where heat disappears, the true champions would be the animals that not only survive but thrive in the eternal ice. Reindeer, for example, are experts at facing extreme cold, with thick fur that acts like a natural thermal coat. Their wide hooves help them walk on deep snow, making them essential allies for human survival in this hostile environment. It's not just reindeer that would dominate this frozen world. Wolves, with their resilience and sharp instincts, form packs to hunt together and secure food. They are true survival masters, capable of enduring long, cold nights, showing how cooperation can be the key in extreme environments. Even cold-adapted birds like woodpeckers and hawks complete this frozen ecosystem, demonstrating that despite the severe cold, life finds a way. This interesting fact reminds us that nature, no matter how harsh it seems, never loses its ability to reinvent itself. What's most fascinating is that we, humans, would be part of this story of endurance. We would be forced to relearn from nature, understand its signs, and respect its limits. Hunting, fishing, and migration would no longer be choices but vital strategies for survival. In this new glacial world, every day would be a test of endurance, a battle against the cold with no end in sight. A planet where winter is not just a season but a sentence. And here's the question that won't go away. Would we be ready to live like this? After all, the real mystery isn't just how nature resists. It's how we, humans, could reinvent ourselves to overcome this challenge. Were you able to imagine what it would be like to live in a world where cold rules absolutely, and heat is just a distant memory? This is such an extreme reality that challenges our understanding, but it brings valuable lessons about resilience, adaptation, and what truly matters in life. Now I want to know from you. If you had to choose, would you dare to face such a challenge? What would be your biggest difficulty? Tell us in the comments because your opinion matters a lot here. And more. What do you think we can learn from places like Oymyakon to face our own personal winters? Those challenges that seem to freeze our progress. Could their resilience inspire ours? If you enjoyed this freezing journey, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss the next amazing stories, full of curiosities, historical facts, and mysteries that will open your mind. Stay tuned because there's much more to come. See you in the next video.